My name is Tiffany Cooper. I'm 30 years old, and I just experienced the most devastating birthday surprise of my life when my parents handed me a $45,000 bill for my own party and expected me to pay it with a smile while 150 guests watched in horror. What my family didn't know was that their elaborate scheme to exploit my financial responsibility and excellent credit was about to backfire spectacularly, costing them far more than they had ever imagined possible. I've always been what my family calls the responsible one, the daughter who saves money instead of spending it, who reads financial books instead of fashion magazines, who builds emergency funds instead of accumulating designer handbags. While my siblings Madison and Blake live paycheck to paycheck funding their Instagram-worthy lifestyles, I've spent the last 8 years building a successful career as a financial consultant and maintaining a credit score that hovers around 820. My approach to money has always been methodical and conservative. I track every expense, contribute the maximum to my retirement accounts, and maintain 6 months of living expenses in my emergency fund. I drive a reliable Honda Civic that I bought used and paid off early, live in a modest but comfortable apartment, and find genuine satisfaction in watching my savings grow rather than diminishing my net worth for temporary pleasures. This financial discipline has allowed me to build real wealth while still enjoying life in meaningful ways. I take one thoughtful vacation per year, invest in experiences that matter to me, and never deny myself necessities or reasonable wants. But I don't buy things to impress other people, and I don't spend money. I don't have to maintain an image that isn't sustainable. My family has never understood or appreciated this approach to financial management. My parents, Susan and Gary Cooper, have always lived beyond their means, financing luxury purchases through credit cards and loans while mocking my boring lifestyle choices. They see my financial success as evidence that I'm selfish, rather than recognizing it as the result of years of disciplined choices and hard work. Tiffany hoards money like a dragon, my mother would say whenever family conversations turned to finances. She makes good money, but lives like a college student. What's the point of having money if you never spend it on anything fun? The criticism stung, because it completely misrepresented both my lifestyle and my values. My siblings Madison and Blake have inherited our parents' attitudes about money and spending. Madison works as a marketing coordinator, but spends most of her income on clothes, beauty treatments, and weekend trips that she documents extensively on social media. Blake bounces between sales jobs while accumulating credit card debt to fund his expensive hobbies and frequent dining out. Both of them have borrowed money from me over the years. Small amounts that were never repaid, but not significant enough to damage our relationships. I learned to think of these loans as gifts, rather than expecting repayment. But I also learned to limit how much financial assistance I was willing to provide to family members who didn't share my values about money management. The dynamic in our family has always been clear. I'm the responsible one who has money saved, and everyone else lives more spontaneously and financially carelessly. During family gatherings, they would joke about my cheap habits while discussing their latest purchases and expensive plans. I learned to laugh along while privately feeling hurt that my achievements were being dismissed as character flaws. Have you ever felt like your family members resented your success rather than celebrating it? That's exactly how I felt during most family interactions, where my financial stability was treated as selfishness rather than recognizing the sacrifices and discipline required to build that stability. 3 months before my 30th birthday, my family's attitude toward me seemed to shift in a positive direction that filled me with hope about our relationships. My mother called me with unusual enthusiasm and warmth, suggesting that she was finally beginning to appreciate my achievements and wanted to celebrate this milestone birthday in a meaningful way. "Tiffany, honey," Susan said, her voice filled with excitement I hadn't heard in years. "Your father and I have been talking, and we want to throw you a really special 30th birthday party. You've worked so hard and accomplished so much, and we think it's time to celebrate you properly." The offer was both surprising and touching. My family had never shown much interest in celebrating my achievements, and their previous birthday acknowledgments had typically consisted of dinner at a chain restaurant, followed by criticism of how I was wasting my youth by being too focused on financial security. "That's really thoughtful, Mom," I said. genuinely moved by what seemed like a new level of appreciation and support from my family. "I'd love to celebrate with you, but I don't need anything elaborate. Maybe we could have a nice dinner with the family and a few close friends." "Oh no," Susan replied quickly. "We're thinking something much more special than that. You only turned 30 once, and we want this to be a celebration you'll remember forever. We're planning something really wonderful that will show you how proud we are of everything you've accomplished." The conversation continued with my mother explaining that she wanted the party to be a complete surprise and that I should just plan to be available on my birthday weekend. She assured me that everything would be taken care of and that I wouldn't need to worry about any of the planning details. "Just show up looking beautiful," she said, "and let us handle everything else. This is going to be the birthday celebration you deserve after all these years of working so hard and being so responsible with your money." Over the next few weeks, Madison and Blake also made comments about the upcoming party that reinforced my belief that my family was finally recognizing my achievements and wanted to show their appreciation. They seemed excited about the celebration and hinted that it would be larger and more elaborate than anything our family had ever organized. "Mom and Dad are really going all out for this," Madison told me during a lunch we shared 2 weeks before my birthday. "They've been researching venues and vendors, and they keep talking about how they want this to be perfect for you. I think they're finally realizing how amazing you are, and how much they've taken your success for granted." The apparent change in my family's attitude was incredibly meaningful to me. For years, I had felt like an outsider in my own family, because my values and lifestyle choices were so different from theirs. The idea that they were finally seeing my financial responsibility as something to celebrate rather than criticize filled me with happiness and optimism about our relationships. As my birthday approached, I found myself looking forward to the celebration with genuine excitement. I had always dreamed of having my family truly appreciate and support my achievements, and it seemed like that dream was finally coming true. I bought a beautiful new dress, scheduled hair and nail appointments, and prepared to enjoy what I hoped would be a turning point in our family dynamics. The morning of my birthday, I woke up feeling genuinely happy and optimistic about my family relationships for the first time in years. The apparent effort and thought they were putting into my celebration felt like validation that my responsible lifestyle and financial success were finally being recognized as achievements worth celebrating rather than personality flaws to be criticized. What I didn't know was that my family was indeed planning an elaborate celebration, but not for the reasons I believed, and not with the financial arrangements I would have ever agreed to. The surprise party itself exceeded every expectation I had about what my family might plan for my birthday celebration. When Madison picked me up that Saturday evening under the pretense of taking me to dinner, I was genuinely shocked when we arrived at the Meridian Grand Ballroom, one of the most expensive venues in downtown, with valet parking and elaborate decorations that must have cost thousands of dollars. Surprise! The crowd of approximately 150 guests erupted in celebration as I walked into the beautifully decorated ballroom, and for a moment, I felt overwhelmed with gratitude and amazement that my family had organized something so thoughtful and elaborate for my 30th birthday. The venue was absolutely stunning, with elegant floral arrangements, professional lighting, and round tables covered in crisp white linens and fine china. A live jazz quartet was playing in one corner while servers in formal attire circulated with champagne and gourmet appetizers. The scale and sophistication of the event was far beyond anything I would have expected my family to organize. As I moved through the crowd accepting congratulations and birthday wishes, I recognized colleagues from my financial consulting firm, friends from college, neighbors from my apartment building, and extended family members who had traveled from out of state to attend. The guest list was comprehensive and thoughtful, including people from every area of my life who mattered to me. "Tiffany, this is incredible," my best friend Jennifer said as she hugged me. "Your family really outdid themselves with this celebration. The venue is gorgeous, the food is amazing, and everyone who matters to you is here. You must feel so loved and appreciated." I did feel loved and appreciated, more than I had in years of family interactions. The apparent effort and expense that had gone into the celebration felt like a clear message that my family finally understood my value and wanted to honor my achievements in a meaningful way. The evening continued with gourmet dinner service, heartfelt toasts from family and friends, and entertainment that included both the live jazz quartet and a professional DJ who played music that spanned my entire life from childhood favorites to current hits. Every detail seemed carefully chosen to create a memorable and sophisticated celebration. "I can't believe you planned all of this," I said to my mother during a quiet moment between toasts. "This is the most beautiful party I've ever attended, and I'm so touched that you put this much thought and effort into celebrating my birthday." Susan smiled in a way that I now recognize contained satisfaction that had nothing to do with my happiness. "We knew you deserved something special," she said. "You've worked so hard and been so responsible with money that we wanted to show you what it's like to really celebrate in style." As the evening progressed, I noticed that many of the guests were people I didn't recognize, friends of my parents and siblings, rather than people connected to me personally. But I assumed they had been included to make the celebration larger and more festive, which seemed consistent with my family's apparent desire to honor my achievements publicly. The highlight of the evening was supposed to be a heartfelt speech from my father, acknowledging my accomplishments and expressing pride in the woman I had become. Gary took the microphone as the dinner service concluded, and I prepared to feel emotional as he shared his appreciation for my hard work and financial success. "Ladies and gentlemen," Gary began, "we're here tonight to celebrate our daughter Tiffany's 30th birthday, and what a celebration this has been. The venue is beautiful, the food has been exceptional, and the entertainment has been first class. Tiffany has always been careful with money, so we knew she would never splurge on something this elaborate for herself." The audience laughed and applauded, and I felt a warm glow of appreciation for what seemed like my father's understanding of my financial values and his desire to give me an experience I would never have chosen for myself, but could thoroughly enjoy. "So we decided to give her the birthday celebration she deserves," Gary continued, "complete with all the luxury and style that her hard work and financial success have made possible. Tonight has been a night to remember, with the finest venue, the best food, and entertainment that has kept everyone dancing and celebrating." I was smiling and feeling grateful as my father's speech continued, completely unprepared for what was about to happen next. "And now," Gary said, his tone shifting in a way that made my stomach clench with sudden anxiety, "it's time for the final surprise of the evening." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a manila folder that he held up for the crowd to see. "Surprise, Tiffany," he announced with a grin that I now understand was predatory rather than celebratory. "Here's your bill. $45,000 for this amazing party. Time to pay up." The applause and laughter from the crowd died instantly, as the implications of what my father had just said began to sink in. The beautiful celebration that I had assumed was a gift from my family was actually an elaborate trap, designed to force me to pay for a luxury party I had never requested or approved. Have you ever had a moment when your entire understanding of a situation shifted so dramatically that you felt physically dizzy? That's exactly what happened as I stood in front of 150 guests, while my father handed me a folder containing detailed receipts and invoices for every aspect of the elaborate celebration I had been enjoying. The ballroom venue rental, $8,500. Professional catering for 150 guests, $12,000. Live entertainment and DJ services, $4,500. Floral arrangements and decorations, $3,200. Premium bar service, $5,800. Valet parking and service staff gratuities, $20,100. Photography and videography, $3,900. Specialty linens and tableware, $1,800. The list continued with charges for everything from custom invitations to coat check services, totaling exactly $45,000. "We knew you'd never agree to spend this much on yourself," Susan chimed in, her voice filled with false sweetness that couldn't disguise the manipulation behind her words. "So we took the initiative to plan everything and handle the arrangements. You can afford it. You never spend money on anything fun anyway." The public humiliation was unlike anything I had ever experienced. Standing in front of my colleagues, friends, and extended family while being presented with a massive bill for a party I had never authorized felt like being stripped naked in front of a crowd. The assumption that I would simply pay, because the money had already been spent, was both arrogant and financially abusive. "But I never agreed to pay for any of this," I said, my voice barely above a whisper as I tried to process what was happening. "You told me this was a birthday gift, a celebration you wanted to give me because you were proud of my achievements." Madison and Blake began laughing as if my shock and distress were entertaining, rather than the natural response to financial betrayal and public humiliation. "Oh, come on, Tiffany," Blake said loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Don't ruin a good time with your typical money worries. You can afford this? And you had a great time, didn't you? We gave you the perfect 30th birthday party," Madison added, "with everything first class and elegant, exactly what someone with your income should be celebrating with. Stop being so cheap and just pay for the party you obviously enjoyed." The casual dismissal of my financial shock and the expectation that I should be grateful for being tricked into paying for an unauthorized celebration was breathtaking in its audacity. They were treating my responsible approach to money as a character flaw that justified deceiving me about the financial arrangements for my own birthday party. I could see guests beginning to whisper among themselves and exchange uncomfortable glances as they realized they were witnessing a family financial crisis rather than a heartwarming birthday celebration. Several colleagues from my firm looked particularly disturbed by what they were seeing, clearly recognizing the professional and personal implications of the situation. "How exactly did you pay for all of this if you're asking me for $45,000 now?" I asked, dreading the answer but needing to understand the full scope of what my family had done. The silence that followed my question was deafening, and I could see my parents exchanging glances that confirmed my worst fears about their methods for financing this elaborate trap. "Well," Gary said, his voice becoming defensive as he realized the crowd was no longer supportive of what they were witnessing. "We used your credit cards to handle the deposits and initial payments. We knew you'd want to celebrate in style once you saw how amazing everything turned out." The revelation that my parents had used my credit cards without permission to finance a $45,000 party hit me like a physical blow. They hadn't just surprised me with a bill. They had committed credit card fraud and identity theft while manipulating me into believing they were honoring my achievements. "You used my credit cards without my permission?" I asked, my voice rising as the full magnitude of their betrayal became clear. "You stole my financial information to pay for a party I never authorized, and now you're demanding that I cover the remaining costs?" The word "stole" seemed to shock some of the remaining guests, and I could see people beginning to move toward the exits as they realized they were witnessing something much more serious than a family disagreement about party expenses. Susan stepped forward, her voice becoming more aggressive as she realized their plan was not proceeding as they had expected. "We're family, Tiffany. We didn't steal anything. We just used resources that we knew were available to make sure you had the birthday celebration you deserved. You're being dramatic about a simple financial arrangement. A simple financial arrangement would involve asking for my consent before spending my money," I replied, surprised by how calm my voice sounded despite the rage and betrayal I was feeling. "What you did was commit fraud by using my credit cards without authorization." The legal terminology seemed to unnerve my parents, and I could see them beginning to realize that their assumption about my willingness to simply pay the bill was not going to prove accurate. What they didn't know was that I had discovered the unauthorized credit card charges 3 weeks earlier and had been preparing for exactly this moment ever since. The truth was that I had known about my family's credit card fraud for weeks before the party, having discovered the unauthorized charges during my routine monthly review of all my financial accounts. The moment I saw charges from high-end catering companies, event venues, and party planning services that I had never authorized, I knew something significant was happening that involved my family and my money without my consent. My initial reaction had been confusion and concern, rather than anger. I wondered if there had been some kind of identity theft, or if my credit card information had been compromised by criminals. But as I reviewed the vendor names and amounts, a pattern emerged that pointed directly to my family's involvement in whatever was being planned. Instead of confronting them immediately or canceling the charges through my credit card company, I made a decision that would prove crucial to everything that followed. I contacted the Financial Crimes Division of my bank and explained that I had discovered unauthorized charges that appeared to be connected to family members who had access to my personal information. "Ms. Cooper," the financial crimes investigator explained, "credit card fraud is a serious crime. regardless of the relationship between the cardholder and the person making unauthorized charges. Family members who use someone else's credit cards without permission are committing the same crime as strangers who steal credit card information. Working with the bank's fraud department, I documented every unauthorized charge while allowing the transactions to continue processing. The investigator explained that catching financial criminals in the act of completing their scheme often provided stronger evidence for prosecution than stopping them in the early stages. I also began discreetly recording conversations with my family members about the upcoming party, hoping to gather evidence of their knowledge and intent regarding the unauthorized credit card usage. The recordings would prove invaluable in demonstrating that this was not a misunderstanding or mistake, but a deliberate scheme to force me to pay for expenses I had never authorized. "We're planning something really special for Tiffany's birthday," I heard Susan tell her sister during a phone call that I recorded when she called while I was visiting. "She'll never agree to spend the money on herself, but once she sees how beautiful everything is, she'll be happy to pay for it. She has the money just sitting in her accounts anyway." The recordings revealed not just the unauthorized use of my credit cards, but also the deliberate manipulation and financial exploitation that my family was planning. They weren't organizing a gift for me. They were using my credit and my reputation to fund a luxury party for their own enjoyment, while expecting me to bear the financial consequences. During the 3 weeks between discovering the fraud and attending the party, I had worked with financial crimes investigators to gather comprehensive evidence of every unauthorized transaction. I had also consulted with an attorney who specialized in family financial crimes to understand my legal options and rights. The fact that they're family members doesn't change the legal definition of credit card fraud, my attorney explained. Using someone's credit cards without permission is a crime, and the relationship between the parties doesn't provide any legal protection for the perpetrators. I had also prepared all the necessary paperwork to dispute the charges through my credit card company and to pursue both criminal charges and civil recovery of all costs, plus damages and legal fees. Walking into that ballroom on the night of the party, I knew exactly what was going to happen, and I was prepared for every aspect of their scheme. The shock and hurt I felt when they presented me with the bill was genuine, but it was shock at the personal betrayal rather than surprise at the financial fraud I had been expecting. Have you ever had to pretend to be surprised by something you had been preparing for weeks? That's exactly what I did as I allowed my family to complete their scheme while knowing that every word and action was being documented for the legal consequences they were about to face. As my parents stood in front of the remaining party guests expecting me to meekly accept responsibility for their unauthorized spending, they had no idea that their financial crime was about to become their worst nightmare. "I need a few minutes to process this situation," I said calmly, taking the folder of receipts from my father's hands. "This is obviously much more complicated than I was prepared for tonight." What I was actually doing was texting my attorney and the financial crimes investigator to let them know that the moment we had been preparing for had arrived, and that it was time to execute the plan we had developed over the previous 3 weeks. Within 10 minutes, the remaining party guests would witness the most dramatic reversal of fortune they had ever seen at a birthday celebration. My attorney arrived at the ballroom with a briefcase full of legal documents and a very serious expression that immediately changed the atmosphere in the room. James Mitchell was a tall, distinguished man in his 50s who specialized in financial crimes, and his presence clearly indicated that this situation had moved far beyond a family disagreement about party expenses. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced to the remaining guests, "I need everyone's attention for a moment. My name is James Mitchell, and I'm here representing Tiffany Cooper in a matter involving credit card fraud and identity theft that has occurred in connection with tonight's event." The formal legal language and professional presentation transformed the awkward family drama into something much more serious. Guests who had been preparing to leave suddenly stopped and turned to watch what was clearly going to be a significant legal proceeding. "Ms. Cooper," James continued, "I have the documents we discussed, and I'm prepared to proceed with the actions we planned." James opened his briefcase and removed a stack of legal papers that he handed to me before turning to address my parents directly. "Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, you are being served with legal notice of criminal charges for credit card fraud, identity theft, and financial elder abuse in connection with the unauthorized use of your daughter's credit cards to finance tonight's event." The transformation in my parents' expressions was immediate and dramatic. The confident expectation that I would simply pay the $45,000 bill was replaced by panic and confusion as they realized they were facing serious criminal charges rather than a simple family financial discussion. Criminal charges? Susan's voice was shaky and disbelieving. We're her parents. We didn't commit any crimes. We just used her credit cards to plan a birthday party. That's not fraud. That's family. Mrs. Cooper, James replied in his professional attorney voice. Using someone's credit cards without their permission is fraud, regardless of your relationship to the cardholder. The fact that your family members doesn't provide any legal protection from criminal prosecution for financial crimes. Gary stepped forward, his face red with anger and panic. This is ridiculous, Tiffany. We're your parents, and we threw you a beautiful party. You can't have us arrested for giving you a birthday celebration. Tell your lawyer that this is just a family misunderstanding. Dad, I said, my voice much calmer than I felt. This isn't a misunderstanding. You used my credit cards without my permission to finance a $45,000 party that I never authorized or requested. That's credit card fraud, and it's a serious crime regardless of our family relationship. James continued presenting the legal documents while explaining the charges in detail. The evidence includes unauthorized credit card charges totaling $45,000, recorded conversations in which you discussed your plan to use Ms. Cooper's credit cards without her knowledge, and witness testimony from party vendors who were told that Ms. Cooper had approved all expenses. The mention of recorded conversations seemed to shock my parents even more than the criminal charges. They clearly hadn't considered that their discussions about using my credit cards might be documented and used as evidence against them. You recorded our conversations? Madison asked, her voice filled with outrage and disbelief. You were spying on your own family and recording private discussions? I was gathering evidence of credit card fraud after discovering unauthorized charges on my accounts, I replied. When I realized that family members were stealing my financial information, I took appropriate steps to document the crime and protect my financial interests. The remaining party guests were witnessing a complete reversal of the evening's dynamics. Instead of watching me be forced to pay for an unauthorized party, they were seeing my parents face serious legal consequences for financial crimes they had committed, while assuming they could exploit our family relationship to avoid accountability. Blake tried to intervene on our parents' behalf. Tiffany, you're being ridiculous about this. So what if Mom and Dad used your credit cards? You have the money, and you enjoyed the party. Why are you trying to destroy our family over a financial technicality? Blake, I said, using someone's credit cards without permission isn't a financial technicality. It's a felony. And planning to force me to pay $45,000 for a party I never authorized isn't a gift. It's financial manipulation and fraud. James stepped forward with additional documents. Mr. and Mrs. Cooper, I'm also serving you with civil papers for recovery of all unauthorized charges, plus damages, legal fees, and interest. The total amount being sought is $60,500, which includes the original $45,000 plus penalties and costs associated with pursuing recovery. The civil lawsuit added another layer of consequences that my parents clearly hadn't anticipated when they planned their scheme. Not only were they facing criminal charges, but they would also be financially responsible for costs significantly higher than the original unauthorized spending. $67,000. Gary's voice was barely a whisper, as he realized that their plan to force me to pay for their party was going to cost them much more than they had ever imagined. The additional costs include legal fees, court costs, interest on unauthorized charges, and damages for financial harm caused by the identity theft and credit card fraud, James explained. Financial crimes have consequences that extend beyond simply repaying stolen money. Susan began crying, as the full implications of their situation became clear. Tiffany, please don't do this to us. We're your parents, and we were trying to give you a nice birthday party. We didn't mean to commit any crimes. Can't we just work this out as a family? Mom, I said, you had the opportunity to work this out as a family before you decided to use my credit cards without permission, and then tried to force me to pay for unauthorized expenses. You chose to commit fraud instead of asking for my consent, and now you have to live with the consequences of that choice. The evening that had begun with what I thought was my family finally appreciating and celebrating my achievements had ended with them facing criminal prosecution for exploiting my financial responsibility and attempting to manipulate me into paying for their elaborate scheme. Have you ever watched people realize that their assumptions about avoiding consequences were completely wrong? That's exactly what I was witnessing as my parents understood that their financial crime was going to result in serious legal and financial penalties that would affect them for years to come. The aftermath of the legal confrontation unfolded over the following months in ways that completely vindicated my decision to pursue criminal charges and civil recovery against my parents for their credit card fraud and financial manipulation. The evidence I had gathered during the 3 weeks between discovering the unauthorized charges and attending the party proved crucial in building an airtight case that left my parents with no viable defense for their actions. The criminal investigation proceeded swiftly once the Financial Crimes Unit had access to the comprehensive documentation I had prepared. Bank records showing unauthorized credit card usage, recorded conversations revealing premeditation and intent, and testimony from party vendors who had been told I had approved all expenses created an overwhelming case for prosecution. Ms. Cooper, Detective Patricia Williams from the Financial Crimes Unit, called me 2 weeks after the party. I wanted to update you on the progress of the criminal case against your parents. The evidence you provided is exceptionally strong, and the District Attorney's Office is prepared to pursue felony charges for credit card fraud and identity theft. The criminal charges carried potential sentences of up to 5 years in prison and substantial financial penalties that would have long-term consequences for my parents' financial security and reputation. The seriousness of the charges reflected the magnitude of their crime, rather than being influenced by our family relationship. Meanwhile, the civil lawsuit was proceeding through the courts with equal success. My attorney had filed comprehensive documentation of all unauthorized charges, plus additional costs, including legal fees, court costs, and damages for the financial harm caused by their fraud. The defendants have essentially no defense against the civil claims, James Mitchell explained during one of our meetings. They admitted in front of 150 witnesses that they used your credit cards without permission, and we have recorded evidence of their premeditation and intent to force you to pay for unauthorized expenses. My parents initially tried to negotiate settlements that would avoid criminal prosecution in exchange for repaying the unauthorized charges, but their proposals all involved asking me to drop the criminal charges while accepting partial financial recovery. I refused all settlement offers that didn't include full accountability for their actions. They need to understand that credit card fraud has consequences that can't be negotiated away because we're family, I told my attorney. If I accept a settlement that lets them avoid criminal prosecution, I'm essentially enabling their belief that they can exploit family relationships to commit financial crimes. The case went to trial 6 months after the party, and the proceedings attracted local media attention because of the unusual circumstances involving family members and the elaborate nature of the fraudulent scheme. The trial lasted 3 days and resulted in guilty verdicts on all charges against both my parents. Susan and Gary Cooper were sentenced to 18 months of supervised probation, 500 hours of community service, and full restitution of $67,500 plus ongoing legal costs. They were also required to attend financial responsibility counseling and were prohibited from accessing credit or financial services without court supervision during their probation period. The civil judgment was equally comprehensive, awarding me full recovery of all unauthorized charges plus damages, legal fees, and interest totaling $73,200. The judgment included provisions for wage garnishment and asset seizure if my parents failed to meet the payment schedule established by the court. But beyond the legal and financial consequences, the case had dramatic effects on our family relationships and my parents' social and professional standing in the community. The local newspaper coverage of the trial included details about their scheme to exploit their daughter's financial responsibility while attempting to force her to pay for an elaborate party she had never authorized. "Local couple sentenced for birthday party credit card fraud" was the headline that appeared in the community newspaper, along with details about their conviction and sentencing that would be permanently available to anyone who searched their names online. The professional consequences were equally significant. Gary lost his position as a regional sales manager when his employer discovered the criminal conviction, and Susan was asked to resign from her volunteer positions with several community organizations that felt her financial crimes reflected poorly on their reputations. Madison and Blake initially tried to blame me for destroying the family by pursuing criminal charges against our parents, but their attitudes changed dramatically when they learned about the comprehensive evidence I had gathered and the premeditated nature of our parents' scheme. "I didn't realize they had recorded conversations about using your credit cards," Madison admitted during a phone call 6 months after the trial. "I thought this was just about party expenses, but when I heard the recordings in court, I understood that they had planned this fraud for weeks. What they did to you was terrible, and I'm sorry I didn't see it that way initially." Blake also eventually acknowledged that our parents' actions had been inexcusable and criminal rather than just poor family financial planning. "I never would have supported their plan if I had understood that they were committing actual fraud," he said. "I thought they were just being spontaneous about party planning, not deliberately stealing your financial information to force you to pay for their entertainment." The most satisfying aspect of the entire situation was watching my parents finally understand the difference between financial responsibility and financial exploitation, and seeing them face real consequences for their assumptions about my willingness to subsidize their lifestyle choices. During the sentencing hearing, Gary made a statement that revealed how much his perspective had changed since the night of the party. "Your Honor, I want to acknowledge that what my wife and I did was wrong and criminal. We took advantage of our daughter's financial success and responsible lifestyle, while assuming that our family relationship would protect us from consequences. We learned that financial crimes are serious, regardless of family connections." Susan's statement was equally revealing about their changed understanding of their actions. "We taught our daughter to be financially responsible, and then we punished her for that responsibility by exploiting her success to fund our own desires. We betrayed her trust and violated her financial security for our own gratification. We understand now that what we did was theft and manipulation, not family celebration." 2 years after the birthday party that changed our family forever, I can say with certainty that pursuing criminal charges and civil recovery against my parents was the right decision for everyone involved. The legal consequences forced them to confront their entitled attitudes about my financial success, while establishing clear boundaries about family financial relationships. My parents completed their probation and community service requirements while maintaining steady employment and living within their means for the first time in years. The financial counseling they received as part of their sentence helped them develop budgeting skills and spending discipline that improved their overall financial stability. Our family relationships eventually stabilized around healthier dynamics based on mutual respect rather than financial exploitation. My parents learned to appreciate my financial responsibility without trying to benefit from it inappropriately, while I learned that protecting myself from financial abuse was necessary for maintaining any positive family relationships. The $73,200 I recovered through the civil judgment was donated to a financial literacy nonprofit that helps families learn responsible money management and avoid financial crimes. Using the money to help other families avoid similar problems felt more meaningful than simply adding it to my personal savings. Madison and Blake both made significant improvements in their own financial management after witnessing the consequences of our parents' irresponsible approach to money and credit. They began budgeting, paying off credit card debt, and building emergency funds rather than living paycheck to paycheck while accumulating debt. Seeing Mom and Dad get convicted for financial crimes was a wake-up call about my own spending habits, Madison told me recently. I realized that I was heading down the same path of financial irresponsibility that led to their criminal behavior. I started taking money management seriously, instead of just assuming someone else would bail me out of financial problems. Blake had a similar transformation in his approach to money and credit. "I never want to be in a position where I'm tempted to steal from family members or commit financial crimes to fund my lifestyle," he said. "I'd rather live modestly and build wealth slowly than risk destroying relationships and facing criminal charges for financial fraud." The most meaningful outcome of the entire experience was that my family finally understood and appreciated my financial values, rather than treating them as character flaws to be exploited. My careful approach to money management was recognized as a strength that had protected me from the financial crimes they had attempted to commit. Have you ever had an experience that forced your family to confront destructive patterns they had been avoiding for years? That's exactly what happened when my parents' criminal behavior finally received appropriate consequences rather than being enabled or ignored. Today, I maintain cordial but boundaried relationships with my family based on mutual respect and clear financial boundaries. They understand that my financial success is not available for their exploitation, while I understand that family relationships require ongoing protection from people who might try to take advantage of financial generosity or responsibility. If you're dealing with family members who treat your financial responsibility as their personal resource, or who feel entitled to exploit your success to fund their lifestyle choices, please know that you have the right to protect yourself from financial abuse regardless of family relationships. Credit card fraud is a crime whether it's committed by strangers or relatives, and you don't have to accept financial exploitation to maintain family harmony. Setting financial boundaries with family members isn't cruel or selfish. It's necessary for protecting your security while maintaining relationships based on respect rather than exploitation. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for family members is to ensure they face appropriate consequences for destructive behavior rather than enabling continued financial irresponsibility. The birthday party that was supposed to celebrate my 30th year ultimately became the catalyst for establishing healthier family dynamics based on honesty, accountability, and mutual respect. The legal consequences my parents faced were proportionate to the crimes they committed, and the civil recovery ensured that I didn't bear any financial costs for their fraudulent scheme. If this story resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button and share your experiences in the comments below. Have you ever had family members try to exploit your financial responsibility or success? How did you handle situations where relatives felt entitled to your resources without your consent? Your story might help someone else who's dealing with similar family financial exploitation and manipulation. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family betrayal, legal justice, and ultimately healing through appropriate boundaries and consequences. Remember that your financial security and personal achievements are worth protecting from anyone who would try to exploit them, even if those people are family members who claim to love you. See you in our next story here on Her Sweet Revenge.